Hey, Dad.
What's going on, Logan?
What is a dentist's favorite hymn?
I don't know. What is it?
Crown him with many crowns.
You just need to go away.
You're listening to The Wayward Willis with Jon and Logan, where two atheists discuss religion, culture, and maybe some politics. If you're offended by blasphemy, profanity, or you hate fun, this podcast may not be right for you. And now, on to the show.
Hey, you.
It's us.
The original Broadway cast of Cats, the musical.
I'm your host, Jon.
And I'm Logan, a sad panda.
This week, we're...
What just happened?
Oh, sorry. I was dictating the podcast with my face in this old hat.
Why?
Because this week, we're talking about Mormonism.
Oh, so what even is Mormonism?
Well, the dictionary defines Mormonism as the predominant religious tradition of the Latter-day Saint movement of Restorationist Christianity, founded by Joseph Smith in the 1820s. The term Mormonism stems from the title of the church's sacred text, the Book of Mormon.
Is that like more men? Are we about to talk about penises some more?
We could. You want to?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, then we won't. Followers of the Book of Mormon are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS.
Everything sounds so much cooler when you abbreviate it.
I always get LDS and LSD mixed up.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, they're both kind of like hallucinations.
Oh, God. We'll get there.
In order to get a feel for what Mormonism is, I feel like we should dive into the history of the church and talk about how it even got started.
I just instantly became bored at the notion of a history lesson from you.
Well, would it make you feel any better if I told you that I did very little research and I'm just making this all up?
That might help, yes. I like improvisation.
Okay, well, I'm actually not.
Oh, well, fuck you.
So remember when we were talking about the big three world religions, and a lot of the time we were talking about how they were created and grown during a fairly primitive time where scientific knowledge was either scarce or non-existent?
Poor Galileo.
One of the strange things about Mormonism is that it was created after the Industrial Revolution, when scientific thought was producing more knowledge and we were inventing useful shit left and right.
I love me some useful shit.
I hate useless shit.
Indeed.
This period of time both helped and hurt the founding of the LDS Church, which we'll discover while we talk about it. The first person, place, or thing
that's a noun
we need to talk about is Joseph Smith.
Also known by his alias Mr. Smith. He once went to Washington. I don't know if that was before or after he and his wife tried to assassinate each other. Also, Agent Smith. He just wanted the access codes to the Zion mainframe. At one point, he teamed up with someone whose last name was Wesson, and they started making guns.
You're an idiot. You clearly don't know anything about Joseph Smith, do you?
So who even is Joseph Smith?
Ooh, a twofer.
I regret this already.
I'm glad you asked. The short answer is that he was a known con artist and superstitious person who couldn't hack it in a real career field, so he went into religion. He was the original prophet and founder of the LDS Church.
But not the LSD Church. That's different. That's very, very different.
Just slightly. But the long answer is actually pretty interesting from a sociological and psychological standpoint. Smith was born in 1805 into a Vermont farming family who moved to small-town New York in 1816. Right about this time, the Second Great Awakening was happening.
Much more happening than the Second Good Awakening.
Where people were all about the supernatural and threw their middle fingers in the face of rationalism.
Fuck rational thinking, man.
Superstition all the way, bitches!
Yeah, woo, fuck you!
Yeah, because living in the real world is boring.
That's why J.K. Rowling is rich now.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean that. The real world sucks and being an adult is stupid.
You're preaching to the choir here, Capitano.
Welcome to adulthood, son.
I've been there. It's bad. I don't like it.
No, just this year. Just right now. Right now, you're an adult.
Second is when I became an adult?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Congratulations. I'm throwing you a party. Woo!
What the fuck?
So anyway, the Second Great Awakening followed and pushed back against the Enlightenment period, where we started to see ideas like the separation of church and state.
Fortunately.
Obviously not very popular with religious people, although I still feel the need to point this out. The Establishment Clause keeps government out of your religion also, you fanatics. It actually protects you, too, if you just let it do its fucking job. God damn it.
Hey, keep God out of your dammits. Separation of church and cuss words.
That's one of my favorite words, though.
Well, it's gone now. Goodbye.
Ah, God damn it.
Hey, what did I just say?
It doesn't matter. Moving on. So, Joseph Smith, at a young age, became enthralled with folk religion.
That's the kind of religion most associated with acoustic instruments and harmonized choruses.
And like hemp shirts and
weed.
Dreadlocks.
And
lots and lots of weed.
Devil's lettuce.
So this was basically just small town offshoot sects of Christianity, mainly Methodists, who threw in some divination and magic for good measure.
Now that's what I'm talking about. Any religion that incorporates trading card games is a good religion in my book.
Not that kind of magic. This magical thinking factors heavily into the writing of the Book of Mormon, as well as the doctrine and practices of the LDS Church. When he was a teenager, Joe started to get all pouty and teenagery about the churches in the United States because they were all teaching different things and he was confused. I feel you, Joe. Religion is confusing.
I don't get religion, and I don't get magnets. Religion is magnets.
So, Joe told his family that he had been visited by an angel named Moroni while he was off in the woods praying for clarity.
Oh, are we just calling him Joe now? I see. Continue.
Yeah, we're on a first-name basis. So the angel told him that all of the churches had been corrupted and weren't preaching the true gospel.
It wouldn't be a religion without the all other religions are wrong theme.
Yeah, and even like your own religion is wrong, which is weird.
Every religion is bad and terrible.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
No, every other.
Oh, God.
Moving on.
Okay, fine. He told Joe where to find a stack of golden plates and seer stones for deciphering a book buried conveniently close to where Joe lived.
Would those be the Josetta stones?
Clever. Very clever.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
Joe spent the next several years wandering around and digging holes all over the area looking for Moroni's treasure.
Moroni almost sounds like a mobster name. Hey, Moroni! What are you, a fucking pirate now? Stop burying your treasure.
The whole time he was doing this, though, his family had fallen on hard times, and in order to survive, Joe and his dad, Joe, took on odd jobs.
Well, now you've gone and done it.
This is where the magical thinking and superstition comes in. Do you know what a dowsing rod is?
Unfortunately, I do.
Okay, well, for the one person in the jungle in South America who doesn't, it's a stick that a person uses with the claim that they can find water or oil or whatever through the pull of the object being found on the stick they're holding.
What makes you think that somebody in South Africa is listening to our podcast?
I didn't say South Africa, I said South America.
Oh, South America, my bad. Whatever. Moving on.
If they're trying to find oil, they call it doodle bugging. Let's not confuse this with the jitterbug, which is a dance.
What? No.
But I suppose that if you were trying to find oil with a stick and you actually did, you would be so freaking surprised and excited that you might do the jitterbug.
Perhaps.
So there you go.
Although I'm pretty sure it's an old person thing, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was before my time.
Yeah. You keep telling yourself.
Okay, moving on. Anyway, all of this is bullshit pseudoscience, and it's been shown over and over to have no better success than random chance. However, as you might expect, tons of people believe it's an actual thing even today.
They think it's magnets. Idiots.
But Joe exploited this magical thinking. He made it known that he could look into shiny rocks and find buried treasure, and I guess there were a bunch of treasure hunters at the time who wanted to employ someone who made it seem like their odds of striking it rich were better than they were.
Yar, take us to the treasure, Joey boy.
I suppose this was before Powerball, so you had to put more effort into not becoming a millionaire than just asking for a ticket when you pay for your gas.
It's funny because he's saying you have no chance. Prove him wrong. Go spend your life savings on Powerball tickets. You've got this.
Actually, I'm not saying that you have no chance. If you do play, then you, by definition, do have a chance. It's just a very small chance.
It's a big chance. Don't let him fool you. Go.
It's almost guaranteed. Yep. Buy Powerball tickets today.
Nailed
it. So Joe had a string of run-ins with unhappy customers as he repeatedly failed to find treasure. Big surprise.
Real pirates would have just gutted him. You lily-livered, yellow-bellied cowards, the lot of you!
So we're just continuing with the pirate theme then,
yes,
huh?
Everybody is pirates.
Okay, awesome. All right then. Joe was taken to court for being a fraud. His life was threatened, and at one point he's said to have planted treasure so he could point treasure hunters to it and seem more legit.
Did he paint an X over it to make it seem more authentic?
How else do you bury treasure? It doesn't even make any sense. you have to.
Damn it, Moroni.
So anyway, if this is true, it's really not surprising. Because he was doing all of this after the printing press had been invented and news was being documented better, there's actually a paper trail of Joe's pratfalls that paint him as a con artist who just made shit up.
All the paparazzi watching him like hawks. Also, why is it that only the crazy people are the ones with the news coverage?
I find it really funny that there would be paparazzi like right around the invention of the printing press because they would still be making like wood carvings.
Exactly.
So they would be like hiding in bushes watching Joe like dig a hole, and they would be like, okay, just hold still for a little while longer, and they're like digging this block of wood.
Oh man. Oh, can you imagine that was a period of time where to be a good journalist you also needed to be good at whittling.
Oh man.
All right.
But you know what? Actually that's pretty cool though. I mean, to have more than one skill like that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. All right. So anyway,
okay, so after all this had gone down and Joe was afraid that someone he'd conned would actually hurt him, he suddenly found Moroni's golden plates and absconded to Pennsylvania.
Hey Moroni, you got your plates right here.
Got your plates right here, pal.
What?
No, he was in New York, though. He wasn't in New Jersey.
It's the Bronx.
I don't know. I've never even been to New York.
Hey, watch your fucking mouth, eh?
All right, moving on. So, once he had moved to Pennsylvania, this is where he started meeting gullible people and convincing them that the book he was going to write would be groundbreaking and important.
Isn't that what every quote-unquote up-and-coming author does, though?
Yeah, did I tell you about that book I'm writing? It's going to be groundbreaking and really important. So, with his silver tongue, he conned them into transcribing and funding his book.
The old person version of Kickstarter. Actually talking to people.
Or licking people.
That too.
With your silver tongue.
No.
Is that how it works?
No, we're done.
Okay, well, one of the guys, Martin Harris, took a second mortgage out on his farm to get enough money to pay a printer to typeset and print the book. He ended up having to sell off his farm. Harris also ended up being kind of a thorn in Joe's side because at one point he showed his wife part of the manuscript that he and Joe had been working on, and she ended up taking it and hiding it and was like, if Joe really were receiving this revelation from an angel, he would have no problem recreating it word for word, right?
Oh shit, roasted son!
You know what Joe did?
Probably something stupid.
You're not wrong. He said that the angel got mad at him for losing the manuscript and took away the golden plates and his ability to interpret them.
Yep, sounds about right.
So he spent a while sulking about it before God changed his mind and sent the angel to help Joe start writing again.
Also, sounds about right. Not
surprisingly, this time around, it was a different book being told from a different perspective.
Yep, still unsurprised.
Because, if you take God's story away, he'll just decide that really wasn't even the story he wanted to tell anyway. So remember in the intro where I was podcasting out of a hat?
Unfortunately, now that I've been reminded of it.
Well, that's because this is one of the funniest parts of the Mormon story to me.
Though the entire thing has been pretty comical thus far.
You're not wrong. So Joe told his scribes that he was given strict instructions by the angel not to let anybody see the plates, or else he'd take away Joe's ability to interpret them.
Hashtag religion logic.
So in order to keep a scribe employed to take dictation and not let the scribe ruin the magic, Joe sat on the other side of a wall and buried his face in a hat with the Joe Zeta stones. And like we've pointed out a couple of times on the podcast already, religious people are the worst magicians ever.
I can't imagine this happening in real life.
I know. You'd be like, turn your back, close your eyes, go to the other side of this wall, and I'm going to put my face in this hat. And then, magic!
Oh, man.
It's actually even worse than like, okay, turn around and I'm going to pick your card. Okay, now turn back around. So the whole time Joe is translating these golden plates out of a hat, people are skeptical about what's going on. Like, Martin Harris's wife, for instance. But even though nobody else is allowed to see the plates, every once in a while, Joe lets selected people kind of dip their toe into the crazy pool to try and assuage their doubt.
Is the crazy pool aboard the crazy train? I feel as though that would be a pretty terrible place to have a pool, considering the crazy train is going off its rails.
Yeah, how would you work a pool on a train? It would be crazy, right? So, one thing we know about the plates is that Joe claimed they were engraved in a language he called Reformed Egyptian, in quotes.
Yes, my favorite of all of the languages.
Well, it's ridiculous because there's no such thing as Reformed Egyptian.
You're just not refined enough to know about it. I went to collage. Yes.
A collage, huh?
Yes, I went to collage.
Maybe I'm just not reformed enough.
That's very true.
Oh, did you go to reform school?
Kill yourself.
So on at least one occasion, an actual scholar was consulted who said the scrawling he was shown was absolutely not a real language, let alone anything resembling Egyptian.
He was a fraud. Send him to the dungeons.
The academic was a fraud?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because clearly the plates are from God. So
no, I'm just saying that Reformed Egyptian is definitely a real thing.
Well, yeah. Your favorite language. So anyway, that didn't stop Joe and his groupies from continuing to make that claim, and the LDS Church still thinks that's what it was.
Good for them, sticking to their scruples like that. Never let educated officials and subject matter experts tell you that what you believe in is literal fiction. Reach for the stars, because if you believe you can touch them, you probably can. Was that motivational
Okay.
enough?
No, we're going with that.
All right, cool. That's my high school graduation speech.
Top notch. Another thing about this supposed Egyptian writing that makes no sense is that the plates were supposed to contain an account of ancient Israelite prophets who came to North America and got a special encore visit from Rakshasa Jesus after he was resurrected.
Guess who's back again?
Jesus back.
No. Tell your friends.
So the question I have is, if these prophets were actually from Jerusalem, but had been removed from the Middle East for more than 600 years before Jesus showed up, why would they have been writing in Egyptian? That doesn't make any freaking sense.
Maybe they were just crotchety and didn't want to learn all that newfangled English language nonsense.
Well, where did they learn Egyptian?
Egypt, duh. Idiot.
Jerusalem, the capital of Egypt?
Yep, nailed it. Geography exam done 100%.
More like pre-geography.
Oh, what? So anyway, the Book of Mormon also details materials and tools that didn't exist when the events of the ancient prophets supposedly happened. Remember, these plates are supposed to be the scrawlings of ancient people who lived on the North American continent around 600 BCE. Even so, we see them talk about horses, cattle, and goats, which weren't brought over from Europe until the 15th or 16th centuries. They mention iron and steel, which has only been around for a couple thousand years. They mention scimitars, which were invented in 450 CE. Timelines are for pussies. Except for the Michael Crichton novel Timeline. That's actually pretty badass. The movie was okay, but let's be honest. Have you ever seen a movie that was actually better than the book it was adapted from?
Nope, book is always better.
Nailed it.
Like the Book of Jasher. You know what the best non-existent thing in the Book of Mormon is?
Everything that's in the Book of Mormon, because it's all non-existent.
Well, you know what? Checkmate. But what I was thinking of was wooden submarines.
Oh my god, I'm crying laughing on the inside right now.
It could only possibly be better if they had screen doors. We are definitely going to revisit this. It's too good to pass up.
Well, we certainly wouldn't want to let it sink.
Oh. In my opinion, the worst part of the Book of Mormon is its blatant racism.
I never thought I could be this level of unsurprised before.
Yeah. It tells stories of huge battles and interactions between the ancient Israelites and other tribes of people with dark skin. Whenever it talks about the dark-skinned savages receiving salvation, it says their skin turned white as snow.
Oh dear. At least it didn't say white as sour cream.
I wonder if they had sour cream back then.
I mean, they apparently had cattle and metal, so, you know, they could probably just do whatever they wanted.
Okay. I mean, maybe just like spoiled milk.
In the Book of Mormon, talking about the ancient prophets, they were just like, yeah, and he put on his VR headset and...
And it came to pass that the Oculus Rift did allow them to smite their enemies virtually.
Hashtag nailed it.
So, yeah, every time the Book of Mormon describes unbelievers or wicked people, they're always described as dark, filthy, and loathsome. Every time it talks about a good or righteous person, they're always bright, white, and shiny. It's kind of like movies where you can always tell who the bad guys are because they wear black. You know, because nuance is overrated.
Subtlety is dead.
This racism in the Book of Mormon laid the foundation for the LDS Church's discrimination against African Americans receiving the priesthood until 1978. Even though African Americans can now receive the priesthood and participate in temple rituals, women still haven't even caught up. So after Joe finished the book and had it printed, he used it to start the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. His theology was controversial, his doctrine was considered heretical, and the church was persecuted and run out of town after town, sometimes violently and leaving a pile of bodies in their wake.
Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
That's an old song, too.
It is very, very old.
So they were pushed out of Ohio and Missouri, eventually ending up in Illinois, where Joe was killed by a mob that stormed the prison where he was awaiting trial for treason.
Wow. Plot twist.
I know, right? After his death, the LDS Church did exactly what all religions do and split into factions. So it's funny because this is exactly why Joe had wanted to found the LDS Church in the first place. Because all of the Christian sects were fighting with each other over doctrine and causing rifts between believers. And now his proposed solution was just another part of the problem.
A con man, even in death. May he forever swindle the naive.
The biggest faction was led by Brigham Young and moved to Utah, which they still call their home to this day. Salt Lake City was started in 1847 by a group of Mormon pioneers consisting of 143 men, 3 women, and 2 children. Let that sink in just for a minute.
Now that's what I call a sausage fest. That's okay.
So
we came around full circle and ended up talking about penises, guys. It's okay.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we got the penises in.
It's not an episode of The Wayward Willis without penises.
So today, Salt Lake City is home to Temple Square, which is the official headquarters of the LDS Church.
LDS HQ, you might say.
Nice. Ever since Joe, the original prophet, the church has maintained the importance and succession of prophets for leadership.
Of course they have.
Any changes to doctrine come from revelations given to the modern-day prophets, like the banning of polygamy in 1890, or the change to allow African Americans the priesthood.
Follow the tides, even if they pull you out of old age misogyny and racism.
I support that.
Follow the progressive tides.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when your church is founded on a long-haired hippie like Jesus, it kind of seems like you should be more progressive than most of these churches really are.
Well, I mean, something about weed, because we talked about folk music. All right, that's too much for me. I'm done.
Okay. So the LDS Church has always had controversial stances on things like polygamy, which the church ended in 1890 after some of their members were imprisoned for it, child brides, baptism of the dead, and inflation of its membership. At last count, the LDS Church claims to have over 15 million members. Our guest this week is no longer one of those.
Because he's dead. Just kidding. Or am I?
Okay.
You decide.
No. Oh, now I don't know what to think. This week, we've pulled a seasoned, well-researched student of the Mormon Church, and we're going to try and get down to brass tacks. So we're talking to Bryce Blankenagel. How's it going, Bryce?
I'm good. How are you guys today?
Doing fantastic.
I'm okay.
He's always just okay.
Just okay.
I very rarely am super great, but when I am, it's appalling for everyone.
But he's here this time, so...
I do, in fact, exist. On this recording, at least. Maybe not in real life. I'm pretty sure that I'm fiction. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Maybe both of you are just figments of my imagination, and I don't even know what's going on. We're all just brains in a vat, right?
This is just Shutter Island all over again.
So you are an exmo, or ex-Mormon. Is there a big population of people coming out as exmos these days?
Yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting growing type of community. If you spend any time on the ex-Mormon subreddit, the numbers of subscriptions have just been really amazing, especially in the past couple of years. It's got a lot of traction. And if I'm not mistaken, at the time we're recording this, they just crested 60,000 subscribers.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, a few thousand of the posts that are on there in the ex-Mormon backlogs are people sending in a picture of a redacted resignation letter from the church. So it's really kind of this support community that exists. Everybody kind of has this same experience and affiliation with Mormonism. A lot of them have read up on the history and realized how bullshit it was and decided to leave, and did so in a very vitriolic manner.
Right.
People talk a lot about like their conversations with family members and with members of their religious community as well, like when their bishop comes and talks to them. So I found an amazing support group that I never knew existed until I became an ex-Mormon. And I'll just add to that, I found a lot more utility with the term secular Mormon. And the reason why is because I grew up in the church. I am a product of the culture of Mormonism, of Utah Mormonism specifically, which holds its own stank to it. And I didn't really leave anything behind the way an like an ex-convict or, an ex-married person leaves a marriage or conviction behind them. I'm still a product of the community, and I still hold a lot of the mannerisms and terminology used by Mormons. I just don't believe in it. I'm a secular person who is still culturally Mormon.
Okay, yeah, I can dig that.
Interesting.
So, just because you mentioned it, the resignation letters are actually a really big deal for the church when people leave, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, or if I remember correctly, with the Mormon church, even if you leave, but you don't write a resignation letter from the church, that you're still considered like on the rolls, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the church publishes they have their semi-annual conference where they tell about certain statistics of the church. You can find the information online quickly by just searching Mormon statistics. And they boast that they are the fastest growing religion, which isn't true, and that they have 15 million members, which isn't true either. So when people realize that they're being lumped into that 15 million, and when the church does makes certain political moves, that they are counted among the members that they are using to bolster their numbers, people can get frustrated. You know, when an organization files an amicus brief with the court and says, we have a following of 15 million people that want to see this a ruling come down in a certain way, and the people who are not affiliated with the church or don't believe in it anymore, like myself, don't agree with the church's stance on a certain political issue or a certain social issue, like, with Prop 8 in California in 2008, and with the current kind of stigma that's surrounding the cake issue, I guess we can call it, out of Colorado.
All of the RFRA stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So the church is highly in favor of that, and a lot of the people who have left the church are like, no, fuck them. They don't get to tell the government what I want by saying that I'm a member of their organization. So it's oftentimes done kind of indignantly, like, no, you can't speak for me. You can say that you have 15 million people, but that's not a true statement, and I'm going to show my protest by filing this letter and forcing you to take me off of your rolls.
Okay, and then not only that, but wouldn't it be accurate to say that some of those 15 million people are actually dead?
We get into a kind of sticky situation here because the church doesn't tell us how they come up with that 15 million number. So I'm not sure how many years they continue to keep somebody's name on their rolls after death. That 15 million, it does not include the number of people that they've baptized for the dead, but that statistic is somewhere. I personally, as a single member, I have done, hundreds of baptisms for the dead. So there are a bunch of members that are added into the rolls posthumously, but they're not included in the 15 million. So one of the primary issues with the church is lack of transparency. And unfortunately, nobody really knows how they come up with that 15 million number.
Right. Okay. So then let's just continue on with the whole baptizing the dead, because it's fascinating to me, but it's also, I don't understand it. So who can be baptized by the Mormon church? Do they have to have been Mormon, or is it just anybody?
Nope. Anybody and everybody.
So could I be baptized when I die?
As soon as you die, yeah. And if you have a family member or somebody who wants you to be baptized, then they will send your name to the temple or to the church records department, and they will have a shining, white-faced little 12-year-old person go into the temple and get baptized for you. And they don't really hold any sort of affinity towards or against a certain group of people. The Mormons were famously sued, I think, in the 1980s because they were baptizing Jews who had been killed in the Holocaust.
Oh, geez.
And yeah, for some reason, some people were a little mad about that. Even just recently, this was published in the ex-Mormon subreddit, a snapshot of the church, their baptismal records for Adolf Hitler. And they've baptized some of the most horrific and evil human beings that we know of or that we have historical records of, just because we know their name, we know their birth and death dates, and that's all you need to be baptized into the Mormon church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah. It almost feels like they're basically just like collecting magic cards or something.
Pokemon.
Yeah. And when you think back on Joseph Smith was the guy who created the idea of baptisms for the dead in the 1840s. September of 1840, I believe, was when he introduced it. He was a dude that was all about the magical worldview, and this was necromancy. Like, if you're just calling a spade here, that's what Mormons are doing. They are practicing magic rituals for dead people. That is necromancy. It's just, for some reason, it has this holy tinge to it that I don't necessarily agree with.
When you put it that way, I'm suddenly interested.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
No, but actually, on the topic of seriously fucked up things, I personally do not have a whole lot of experience with the teachings of the Mormon Church, but it is my understanding that the Mormon Church teachings are fairly out of this world, figuratively as well as literally. And I guess one of my questions to you is, out of those teachings, what would you consider to be the most outlandish and ridiculous of them all?
Dude, okay. So when I was a believing member, nothing about the church stood out to me as being wild and out there, but that's only because I didn't know about other religious teachings and I didn't understand what other religions were claiming as truth doctrines to compare with Mormon truth claims. Now that I'm outside and I have, at a very cursory glance, studied a little bit about some world religions, and I've studied Mormonism for, coming on 5 years now, I have an even harder time answering that now, because the further I get into it, the further I learn about certain teachings, the more I realize just how fucking wacky it is from start to finish. And you can hold up the Book of Mormon, or you can hold up the Book of Abraham that was supposedly translated from these Egyptian papyri that Joseph Smith bought from a dealer in 1836 named Michael Chandler. And you can look at some of these things that Joseph was talking out his ass, and people were just gobbling it up for whatever reason because he was really charismatic or whatever. And it's really hard to try and put a ranking of what is the craziest thing and what is not. I mean, I guess,
is it kind of like trying to decide what is the most magic part of Harry Potter?
Exactly. What is the hardest part to believe out of Harry Potter? There's just so much wacky shit in there that you can't actually nail it down. It's even hard to try and rank craziest to least crazy.
Fair enough.
All right. So,
but let me provide a couple of examples, and I'll let the listeners decide for themselves.
Okay.
So the teaching of Kolob, that God was once a man, Mormons have this throwaway line where they say, "As we are, God once was, as God is, we may someday become." So Mormons believe that God, Elohim, was once just a dude living on a planet called Kolob, or maybe on a planet nearest to the star of Kolob. The teaching is not very clear, and that that Kolob is actually a thing, which translates somehow to the Sirius constellation, and somehow the Kolob is somewhere in that constellation. That is just wacky. Joseph Smith taught that Quakers live on the moon, which is absolutely crazy. Brigham Young taught that people live on the sun, that it's inhabited just like Earth. Mormons practice necromancy beyond just the baptisms for the dead. They do endowments for the dead as well, where they walk people through the temple, and you go by proxy to have people go through the temple practices. These temple practices are tightly affiliated with Masonic rituals, and the specificities of these temple rituals were released to the church a mere 3 or 4 weeks after Joseph supposedly rose to the sublime degree in Masonry. And there are these handshakes that you have to know in order to get into heaven. And the men get to know their names and their wives' names so that they can call them through the veil up to their own planet. But the women can't know the man's names because the women are always subservient to the men. It's like any of these examples are fucking wackadoodle, and these are just doctrine. This is just doctrinal beliefs. This is not even tapping into the actual history of the church.
Right.
Mormonism is the motherlode of McDonald's organized Christianity. So, and what is...
Wait, hold on, back up. Is that a real religion? Something about McDonald's? Because I can get on board with that.
Like McDonald'sism?
Yes.
You wear like a little, golden arches, a necklace to show your true belief in McDonald's.
Is the deity Ronald McDonald? Because I'm totally fucking behind this right now.
Yes, it would be like, our Ronald, which art in heaven, give us now our nugs.
Oh, dearest Grimace, bless us with thine burgers.
And don't fall away to Pennywiseism.
Oh God, that's a whole different. That's a different
false
thing.
Clowns,
entirely.
all right. Thou shalt have no other clowns before me. Okay, but that's a sidetrack. So we were talking about now. Just to clarify, Mormons absolutely do consider themselves Christians, but Christians do not consider Mormons Christians.
For the most part, yeah.
We didn't. I was Southern Baptist, and we were like, fuck Mormons. No, they're not us. So then, since you haven't been out of the church for a really long time, is it safe to say that you went on mission?
I did not go on my mission.
You did not? Okay.
So I've been out of the church for a third of my life now.
Oh.
I'm 26. I left when I was about 16, 17 years old. And that was at a time when missionaries leave when they're 19. And I just kind of stopped attending because I didn't like church. I was more apathetic than, opposed to it.
Okay. Because Logan doesn't know anything about it. When you're 19... When you're 19 and you go on mission, that means bicycles and polyester shirts, right?
Yeah, and little black name tags. Yeah, that's the 2 years, 18 months to 2 years that men and women, mostly men, go out on this hiatus away from the real world and get put into this super insular society of the mission, where every minute of every day is structured and regimented. You're not allowed any individuality. You can't, you have to, it's the white shirt, black pants, sometimes khaki pants, but they really prefer the black pants. The only individuality that people really have is their ties, the different ties that they can wear out there. And this is just the male experience. Of course, women, they get to choose whatever dress they want to wear and whatever from day to day. But men, the only individuality you have is just your ties. And I remember this when I was 21, I guess. I went to one of my best friend's homecomings after his mission, because you go out on your mission after these 2 years, you come home, and there's kind of this big homecoming thing where, a bunch of family members get together, eat a bunch of food, you give a talk in church, and then they're like, oh, it's good to see you again. And, you're basically this brainwashed, clean slate, not knowing what the hell has gone on in reality for the 2 years that you were in a different reality. Oh, wow. And at this time, I was just talking to my friend about his mission, and he was unpacking his bag. And it was the weirdest scenario I think I've ever been in when it came to the church and the very cult-like mentality of the church. Because as my friend had, he opened up his suitcase, he had half of his suitcase was rolled up ties. He had the stack of a few slacks and the huge stack of shirts, all white shirts, black pants, and then tons and tons of ties. And I watched him as he was slowly taking each tie out and meticulously unrolling it, flattening it out on the bed, and then walking over and hanging it up in his closet as we were talking about the mission and everything that he experienced out there. And it was just fucking surreal to see my friend's complete individuality and everything that separated him away from every other white shirt in that entire society, taking out these little tiny tokens of the lost 2 years of his life and hanging them up in his closet to be sequestered away and locked away in the mental closet of his mind for the rest of his life. And I don't know how to describe it, just because it was so eerie and weird to watch this whole thing play out. But it is a very, very cult-like. It's the military version of Mormonism. Okay. You wake up, you scripture study, you work out, then you go tracting or go to meetings. You come home, you scripture study, you go to bed, you wake up, you do it all again. You're never separated from your companion. When you, the only time you're separated is when you're actually actively going to the bathroom. But then after you're finished going to the bathroom, you open the bathroom door and wash your hands. They don't even allow you to wash your hands without being within eyesight range of your companion. It's just a really fucked up scenario to find people in.
So not to detract from the seriousness of that situation, but your friend must have spent a whole lot of money on ties, because ties are not cheap.
They were gifts, because that's all you get on a mission. People can't send you books. People can't send you an MP3 player with songs on it. You don't get access to anything other than ties. So that's all that people send you as birthday and Christmas gifts.
Was there like a secret black market where people were like trading stuff with ties? They were like, I want that yellow striped tie, and I'll give you blah blah or do blah blah for you if you give me that tie.
Like in prison where they're trading things for cigarettes.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I got this Jehovah's Witness missionary tract. I'll trade it for 3 ties, man. It's
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that exists, but having not gone on my own mission, I've never experienced it, so I don't know.
The Mormon underground.
So
the whitest black market you've ever known.
Exactly. So speaking of the white market, the LDS Church had been established very whitely, right? And there was rampant racism because of the way that the texts were written. People with dark skin were considered evil, right? Or the offspring.
Still are.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not as explicit as it used to be, but it's still in the Book of Mormon. I mean, it's everywhere throughout that damn thing that people with dark skin are evil.
Now, so on that topic, I guess my understanding is that the prophets of the church, where there's just like a chain of prophets that just continues to infinity, that they all receive revelations which change the church politics or the church doctrine in certain ways. Now, after the civil rights movement, the LDS Church had a revelation that black people weren't horrible and like not able to be a part of the church, right?
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, to qualify that, it was after the crux of the civil rights movement. I mean, we're talking 1978. That's not typically what we view as the era of civil rights that had pretty much gone
right,
past.
Like well after the civil rights movement.
Yeah, so, I mean, it just goes to show that, well, Mormons do tout the fact that they have a prophet who gives them modern-day revelation that supersedes all previous revelation. So any prophet today can say, oh, whatever that prophet said, now we have a new revelation that trumps all the old revelations. So that's what they did in 1978 when they said, oh yeah, black people, you can have the priesthood now. That came down as essentially a revelation, but it was more just a policy change. However, they don't try and write that part out of the Book of Mormon or anything. They don't try and say, oh yeah, where it says their skin will be turned like unto a flint because of their wickedness and iniquity. We're not going to take that passage out of the Book of Mormon, so the racism is still very explicit in our Book of Mormon, but we just have a new revelation so we can ignore that old stuff that is talked about in the Book of Mormon because this is what really matters. This is what the modern day prophet says.
So then when the prophet gets these revelations, is this like they sit behind a closed door and then come out suddenly, like burst out of the door and they're like, everybody, listen to what I have to say? Or is this like, do there have to be witnesses? Because witnesses are like a really big thing in the Mormon church, right?
Yeah, so what happens is when it comes down to Revelation, it is a unanimous vote among the highest leadership quorum in the church. So you have the quorum of the 12 apostles and the presidency that sits over the quorum, and it has to be unanimous for them to come to any sort of consensus or an agreement on a new revelation. And when you read some accounts, like Bruce R. McConkie's account of how the priesthood revelation came about in the late 70s, there was not unanimous agreement. I mean, there were famously this guy, Mark E. Peterson, who was very racist, was actually out of town at the time that they held the meeting for the vote, and they just called him on the phone afterwards and said, hey, we just delivered the new policy. This is our new, this revelation is just breaking basically tomorrow in the papers. Because had he been in the quorum at the time, he probably wouldn't have voted for it. So it has to be unanimous, which you would think if these are, indeed the prophet, seers, and revelators of our modern day, they're all talking to the same God, then they should be hearing all of the same things said from the same God. But when you have to vote on what God says, I don't know, it doesn't seem to have as much of a divine veneer
that seems to
it.
be some sly politics.
I feel like that's how children should handle parenting. They should just be like, our parents said that we have to clean our room. Do we agree with that or not?
Well, we know how that's going to turn out.
All in favor? Yeah, I didn't think so.
All for video games? All right, that's unanimous. Let's go.
Yep. So parents, we've made a policy change. We had a revelation.
Yep. And now also let's add an addendum: cake before dinner from now on.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I think you should always eat dessert before your dinner anyway.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
Yeah, because you never know if you're going to die eating your dinner, and then you won't have gotten your dessert. So you should eat it first.
Touche.
How are women treated today as compared to, I don't know, 100 years ago?
Not that differently. Okay. Women are child bearers. Okay. That's it. That's why men have, their one planet with so many wives, because they have to populate that planet with spirit children. And that is the women's job. You raise spirit children.
Oh, spirit children.
Those are my favorite kind of children.
I'll bet they're easier to raise, spirit children.
Yeah, right? You don't have to feed them. You don't have to take them out of the park and play. Yeah.
But they haunt the fuck out of you.
Like, keep moving stuff around in your kitchen. You're like, God damn it, spirit children.
Just face through the wall and go to your room.
I'm going to be checking my closet tonight for the boogie children.
The boogie children.
I like that.
That's like the adult version of,
right?
Like your deepest, darkest fear is like frightening ghost children.
The boogie children went out of style after the 70s.
Oh, fuck you. No.
No. Deep cut.
All right. So given that the Book of Mormon was dictated out of a hat, do you think that in present day somebody could get away with sticking their face in a hat and creating a new religion?
That's an interesting question. I'm all about having to do certain things to get into the creative process, right? And, every writer needs their catalyst to get into the right state of mind so that they can fill a page with words and whatnot. And I'm not going to disparage one method over another. Joseph's method was likely imbibing in a bunch of powerful plant chemicals and sticking his face in his hat and breathing carbon dioxide for hours on end and seeing things appear in his hat because of the shiny surface of a rock. So, Edgar Allan Poe was famously very addicted to laudanum, which is just, liquid opium. It was basically heroin before heroin was a thing.
It was indie heroin.
It was hipster heroin.
Yeah, this is the hipster's heroin. Yeah.
I liked heroin before it was cool.
Oh, where is that endorsement? So the thing is, we don't get to see the creative process of so many religions. It just so happens that Mormonism and Scientology are really recent. I mean, if you read through the Book of Revelation, I really wonder what was growing on the island of Patmos, right? Like, what was John eating when he was seeing this 7-headed, 10-horned demon thing raised from the surface of the ocean? And like, what the hell is
that? That was real.
No, that was
just.
Yeah, but I mean, there was also, exactly. From what I understand, there is no fresh water on Patmos.
Oh wow.
I could be wrong.
Wait, did he just know something about
this isn't
Mormonism
Mormonism.
that you didn't know?
This is the Newt Testament.
Oh. Right. Cute.
Yeah, but there are lots of newts on
so-
Patmos, but there's no fresh water.
Whoa. So, yeah, a dude drinking seawater until he went completely lost his mind and then eventually died. Yeah, I mean, obviously some wacky shit is going to come out of his brain. So, like, the thing is, everything in the Bible has this kind of mystique that's lost in its ancient nature. I mean, we say, oh, the Bible is such an incredible book, 40 writers, 64 books over 2,000 years, and it's all super consistent, and it's really incredible. Well, we don't get to see the creative process that these writers were using in order to come up with their revelations. Joseph Smith is a lot more recent than ancient Israelites. And we have the court documents showing him as a glass looker and convicting him when he was 20 or 21 or something because he was defrauding somebody out of money. I mean, if we had the court records for Jesus, maybe we wouldn't, treat him with such a high level of regard as our one true savior if he were, caught by the Romans for having, defrauded people out of thousands of dollars or cenotes or whatever. So, that's the problem with Mormonism and with Scientology is they're so recent, and they were created at a time that the Gutenberg printing press was already a thing. So they didn't get to escape publications. They didn't get to escape news articles that were written about these wacky religious fanatics. So that being said, people start religions every single day. And a lot of religions lately are started with nothing more than a blog post of somebody, I'm starting a religion and we're gathering here at this time at this place. And, you don't even need the stupid, props of having a hat and a rock or the Book of Mormon to create a religion anymore. So I would say that religions are created out of even wackier circumstances now than they used to be. And, sure, if somebody wanted to dictate a new Christianity out of a hat, I'm sure it would pick up some followers somewhere along the line.
Or if they wanted to dictate McDonald'sism out of the wrapper of a double cheeseburger.
Yes, I'm on board.
I'm going to make this happen, guys.
He's just sitting back with French fry crumbs all over his chest and pickle chips on his eyes. He's like, write this down.
But then clown makeup slowly started painting itself down my face, and my eyes started glowing this bright white and just shooting, and this brightness just overfilled the McDonald's, and all of a sudden I was enlightened.
Hey, I'm sure if you could get somebody's ear who's, a higher up person in McDonald's and told them that they could operate as a religion and do everything tax-free, I'm sure they would realistically consider it.
I mean, after this whole Szechuan sauce debacle, I'm sure that's what they want.
Don't get me started.
And that's the way the news goes.
So you have, and you've been working on the Smith entheogen theory. What is that?
Yeah. So this is a tragically understudied historical model for Joseph Smith and Mormonism that I think deserves a lot more investment in research. So basically, my research partner and my research partner is Cody Nakoni. He hosts the Silly Rabbits podcast where he just dives into the history and science behind psychedelics. He and I teamed up to co-author this paper titled Revelation Through Hallucination. Basically, we're taking our multidisciplinary approach and intertwining our fields of expertise and knowledge to create this Smith entheogen theory that Joseph Smith was likely using powerful psychedelics to create religious and spiritual experiences in the minds of his followers. And he was probably administering it through the sacrament or through anointing oil that he was pouring on these people's heads. And it takes a very cursory reading of what was going on in Kirtland, Ohio at the time Joseph was living there to see that people were having some really wacky experiences. I mean, some people being possessed by demons, some people having hallucinations of angels, people having auditory hallucinations of rushing wind and of people talking and saying their names, of people running out naked into the midnight snow and making snow angels.
Wait, not everybody does that?
Well, I mean... I think most people who are hopped up on MDMA might, but...
Yeah, so what he's trying to say is, you're a fuck-up.
Well,
Get your life together.
I was just going to say, I like running around naked. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's different.
In at midnight with snow outside, I mean, you got to be having a hopped up body temperature to be doing that. So, I don't know. And and maybe even running away from demons.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? But there are other accounts of people who just like lay in trances for days at a time, where there's no explanation for why, but they're just caught in this visionary state. And that even makes itself apparent a couple of times in the Book of Mormon, where somebody is struck with the spirit and they lay as if they're dead for a few days. And you see a pervasion of these various accounts, and you realize that the majority of them happen after the people are administered the sacrament and they're singing hymns, and they've probably been fasting for a number of meals before then, and it really starts to become apparent that they might have been augmenting their experience, their spiritual experience with these psychedelics.
They got roofied.
Yeah, maybe that might explain some of Joseph's aphrodisiac and hypnotic tendencies for some of his women in Nauvoo. But yeah, that was just one small aspect. I mean, through a number of these magical books that Joseph Smith had access to in his years prior to founding Mormonism, there are recipes for aphrodisiacs and for these various psychedelics that put people into hypnotic trances and stuff. So it's not like the information was hidden away or he had to go, looking into these ancient texts to find stuff like this. I mean, it was knowledge that the majority of people
Are you
had.
saying that knowledge didn't have to come directly from angels?
Well, I think it would be slightly alarming if angels were telling you exactly the ingredients you would need to make an aphrodisiac.
That's my kind of angel. What are you talking about?
That's my kind of religion right there.
Oh, man.
But I mean, Joseph, all the time when he was translating the Bible, when he was, coming up with all of these revelations, yeah, when you get hopped up on some psychedelics, you can sure hallucinate that there are angels talking to you, whether, it's in a spiritual state or a visionary state, or whether that's just somebody standing in the room and talking to you and you think that they're channeling a spirit or something like that, like Sidney Rigdon would. It's really hard to tell exactly what it was like if, you're just a fly on the wall in the room, but I think there's a lot of explanatory power to be had in this Smith entity.
Okay, and it wouldn't really be unique to see a religious leader who uses drugs and the like to get his congregation to basically behave the way he wants or to believe the things he wants them to believe.
Not at all. I mean, you don't even need drugs for a religious leader to have this charisma, right? Because a common refutation of this would be, well, my grandma saw angels, but she, I don't think she was hopped up on mushrooms or something. It's like, no, that's kind of missing the point. The point that we're getting at is you can get to, this altered state of consciousness or have this spiritual experience, whether you're on psychedelics or not. It just so happens that when you take psychedelics, you can get there a lot faster and a lot more reliable. And if you're a religious leader who relies on personal revelation and charisma and people having these spiritual experiences, it's really not hard to think that you're going to go with a more reliable method. You got to build up the ranks by any means necessary. As long as they're paying you tithing, it's all good, right?
Yeah.
What kind of links can we put in our show notes, and where can we send our listeners to find more of your stuff?
People can find that information at nakedmormonismpodcast.com or on iTunes and Stitcher and whatever your favorite podcasting app of choice might be, just by searching Naked Mormonism. Also on Facebook and Twitter at those same handles. You can follow me there. I don't typically stay very active on the social media because I like to spend my time inside the 19th century instead of inside this week. So but occasionally from time to time I'll be posting up over there. But yeah, that's
great.
Pretty much...
Well, I really hope that someday I get to meet you in person.
Likewise, this has really been a pleasure, Jon and Logan.
It was slightly better than unpleasant. I secretly love you.
Random verse.
Random verse.
Random verse.
Random
verse. Our random verse this week comes from the Book of Ether, 2 verses 19 through 20. Goes like this.
And also we shall perish, for in them we cannot breathe, save it is the air which is in them. Therefore we shall perish. And the Lord said unto the brother of Jared, Behold, thou shalt make a hole in the top, and also in the bottom. And when thou shalt suffer for air, thou shalt unstop the hole, and receive air. And if it be so that the water come in upon thee, behold, ye shall stop the hole, that ye may not perish in the flood.
What the fuck?
Hey, remember when I was telling you about wooden submarines?
Is that what this is about?
Yes.
Jesus Christ. That's fucking awful. What in the hell?
Yeah, so this verse is describing Jared and his
He went to
clan.
Jared.
They were in their wooden boats that could go underwater, but they were afraid that if they went underwater, because these boats were watertight,
Yeah.
that the only air they would have in these submarines was just whatever air was in them to begin with. And then eventually, obviously, they were going to suffocate if they breathed all the air.
Yeah.
So God's phenomenal plan for these submarines
Yep.
was put a hole in the top of it, put a hole in the bottom of it, and then just unplug the hole whenever you need to breathe.
Yep. Yep. That's how physics works. Fluid dynamics cease to
This
exist.
is, like, if you're envisioning this as a cartoon, this is amazing. Because what ends up happening is they unplug both holes, like the top one and the bottom one, and then just this stream of water pours through the top and straight into the bottom one and just, like, straight through the submarine. And nobody even gets wet because the water just pours straight through.
Yep. That's what happens.
That would be so amazing.
That's pretty freaking hilarious. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, this verse is trash. I don't even need to analyze this one. It's just garbage.
No, but okay. So let's just let's dig a little deeper here. So Jared. So Jared actually is quite the scientist because he's going to be locked in this boat and he's a thinker. He's like, wait a minute, hold on. I know how this works. We get sealed up in this boat. There's only so much air to breathe. And then we're fucking doomed. And he was right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got to hand it to Jared. He's like forward thinking. Like a lot of people would just seal themselves up in this thing and then only think about it later on when they're suffocating.
Ah, shit. I should have asked God about the ventilation system in this submarine. In this wooden submarine.
How did they even propel this thing?
Watertight.
I'm curious.
Little flippers on the side of it that they just rode back and forth.
Maybe they just had like little dolphin friends that pulled it. Maybe it was like a carriage. Like they harnessed dolphins in the front of it, and then the dolphins just pulled it along underwater.
Maybe they were just friends with the Little Mermaid, because this is a cartoon after all.
It is a cartoon. It's an amazing cartoon.
All right, so if we had to rate wooden submarines on a scale of 2 prehistoric cattle to 3 reformed Egyptian glyphs, what are you giving this verse?
I give this 2 unsoiled pairs of magic Mormon underwear.
Okay, then. That's what we're giving wooden submarines.
Before we sign off this week, I want to beg you to take a moment out of your day to review us on iTunes and Google Play if you're enjoying the show. You'll help us get noticed and launch us into the stratosphere of podcast fame and be a part of history. But seriously, if you don't want to give us money like our patrons, Gay Theist and Lisa McLean, you really could help us out by sharing us on social media and telling all your friends. Until next week, if you have questions or comments, please send us an email to podcast@waywardwillis.com. Intro music was provided by Austin Cologne and used with permission. You can find more of Austin's music linked in the show notes. This podcast is a media production of Willisware LLC, all rights reserved.
This has been The Wayward Willis. If you liked what you just heard and you want more of Jon and Logan, you can follow us on Twitter @WaywardWillis, Facebook facebook.com/TheWaywardWillis, or at willisweb.com. If you want to help the show and have a few extra dollars, you can donate per episode or per month on Patreon at patreon.com/wayward. We'll be back next week.